Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 149. I'm really excited for today's guest. This guy who's a breakout player over the last several years in Major League Baseball and truly defines unique in both his pitch mix as well as his delivery. He's also a guy that started working out with CSP this offseason, so it's been cool kind of getting to know him and learn about how he's had to adjust his repertoire and his approach to training over the course of time as his workload has increased. So we're in for a really good episode. Overuse injuries have emerged as one of the biggest threats to players at every level of competition. As an example, at the professional level, ulnar collateral ligament injuries at the elbow alone sideline pitchers for an average of over 17 months. That's a ton of lost development and a threat to lengthy careers. Just as concerningly, though, for youth players, overuse is the predominant mechanism of injury. So what can be done? Obviously, we need to train athletes to be prepared for all the stresses the game throws at them. However, the other side of the equation, recovery, often doesn't get the attention it deserves. Healthy, recovered arms mean you can stay in the game and give your best on the field, and that's where Mark Pro comes in. Mark Pro is a cutting-edge recovery tool that provides all the benefits of active recovery, but without the extra effort, muscular fatigue, or stress to tendons and joints. Players can use Mark Pro as long as needed for exceptional recovery between training sessions or after games. We'll often send Mark Pro units back with athletes to their hotels or even have them use them on team flights. Both easy to use and portable, Mark Pro is a powerful tool that allows recovery anywhere, anytime. Use it while relaxing at home, on the road, or during tournaments. On a personal note, I was originally a naysayer when it came to Mark Pro. However, longtime Cressey sports performance athlete Corey Kluber turned me onto it. He adopted Mark Pro into his post-pitching recovery approach, and it was an integral part of him going out and throwing 200 innings year after year. This led me to experiment with it myself and with more of our athletes, and the feedback was consistently outstanding. Now, just a few years later, you'll see it in every major league organization as part of the routines of some of the most accomplished baseball players on the planet. If you're looking for the same results enjoyed by these athletes, visit markpro.com and use the coupon code Cressey at checkout for an exclusive discount. Again, that's markpro.com, markpro.com, and use the coupon code Cressey, Cressey, at checkout for an exclusive discount. Today's guest is a right-handed pitcher who was raised in Missouri and drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers in the second round of the 2013 MLB draft. A 2017 Tommy John surgery temporarily paused his ascent through the minor leagues, but he was selected to participate in the All-Star Futures game in 2019. Shortly thereafter, he made his MLB debut. He was named National League Reliever of the Month for September of 2020 as he gave up no runs and only 4 hits in 13 innings while striking out 24. At the end of 2020, he received the National League Reliever of the Year award thanks to a season where he put up a .33 ERA and allowed only 18 hits in 27 innings with 53 strikeouts. He was also named National League Rookie of the Year. In August 2021, he was again named National League Reliever of the Month, and by the end of 2022, he'd taken over Milwaukee's closer role. At the time of this recording, over 158 MLB appearances, he struck out 250 hitters against only 72 walks and a 2.03 ERA. He also has 18 career saves and will pitch for Team USA in the 2023 World Baseball Classic. Please welcome to the show, Devin Williams. All right, Devin, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you because I think you actually got a really cool story, and it's been fun working with you this offseason and learn a little bit more about what makes you tick. So let's dig right in.
Sure, let's do it.
So talk to me about, we always start with this with guys. I think it's such an important message because we have a lot of parents and kids and coaches that listen to this talk about your early sports career. I remember you telling me that you had a pretty good soccer background, and that always intrigues me because I feel like soccer players, they develop a lot of dexterity, a lot of change of direction, and it seems to serve them well later. So you were a multi-sport athlete. Was it just soccer? Was it just baseball? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, honestly, I started playing, I think soccer was first and then baseball. Then I kind of dipped into like ice hockey and roller hockey, basketball, football. I did it all, but I stuck with baseball or soccer up until my sophomore year. And then I started to focus more on baseball after that. But yeah, I played my whole life.
Now you were cold weather climate. I mean, St. Louis is not like a particularly warm weather scenario. Like, was it actually like delineated seasons where you had like soccer, basketball, baseball where they were broken out, or did they kind of blend together?
Yeah, no, we'd have, soccer in the fall and then kind of transition to basketball or, hockey younger in my life. Um, and then baseball in the spring and summer. So, it was kind of that's how you knew what time of year it was by which sport I was playing.
Did it pretty much regulate your innings on the baseball side of things? Like you obviously played in the spring, and I'm guessing the first couple weeks we're shoveling snow off the field. But like, did it regulate your innings in the spring into the summer so that you really couldn't get overused?
Yeah. I mean, I would say so, but I mean, at the same time, I didn't start pitching until probably like 12, 13. So I didn't really get a lot of early, wear and tear on my arm. I didn't really focus primarily on that until sophomore year. So I was pretty fresh up until then.
Do you, when you look back on it, like, and you played a position, I assume, all the way through as well on top of pitching. It wasn't just pitching only.
Yeah, I played shortstop or center field when I wasn't pitching.
So be as athletic as you can. Obviously, you were drafted out of high school, and I think it's always like a good discussion. Like in general, obviously, high school draft picks don't work out nearly as well as as college if you look at the big picture. But you obviously did, and it took some time. Like there was a Tommy John surgery along the way, which we'll talk about. But describe yourself. Like what was the scouting report on you as a senior in high school?
Probably, very athletic, lanky, lots to build upon. I was like 165 pounds coming out of high school.
Mhm.
So I had to, do a lot of work in the weight room. You see that. But yeah, I mean, that was probably it, athletic, loose, whippy arm, just a good overall athlete.
Now you're a guy that gets way down the mound. Like extension is one of the things that's kind of the calling card of your delivery. Was that you in high school? Like was it always like super up tempo, get aggressive down the mound, or was that something that kind of evolved over the course of time?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that's always been preached to me from like a young age. My grandpa was always very, you know, um, on me about using my legs and not just being like upper half oriented. So I think it kind of stemmed from that. And it's just kind of, transformed over the years.
When you like look back at your initial couple years of minor league baseball, like were there key competencies that you maybe picked up, even if you didn't realize you were picking them up in that time? Like what was the biggest difference maker for say from say 18 to 22, and where you weren't getting that college experience, but you were still growing in different ways?
Competencies in, as in, what do you mean?
I mean, it just in general, like, was it for you? Was it a mechanical thing? Was it like you said, a strength conditioning thing? Was it just understanding like the routine, the professionalism, like what goes with actually doing this for a job instead of as a as an athletic hobby?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, honestly, a lot of those. Learning what I needed to do in the weight room, getting a routine and figuring out what I need to do every day to, perform at my best and just figuring out my body as a whole, and what works for me because everyone's different. That's why we do the testing.
Mhm.
I'm a different type of athlete than a lot of guys you see on the mound. So, it's just kind of figuring out what works for you.
Absolutely. Like obviously you're a couple years in. I think you were drafted in 13, and then your Tommy John surgery was 2016, 17, kind of in that timeline. Was it something that gradually built? Was it, one pitch it went? How did that all come about?
Honestly, I had never had any elbow issues at all. I was warming up in spring training, getting ready to throw a inner squad, and I kind of felt a twinge before I went out there, and then went out on the mound, threw a pitch, and my whole arm just kind of felt hot, like it was very warm. And then the next pitch, I stupidly threw another pitch, and I felt it pop. So I knew right there that it was done. I would have to have surgery.
Yeah, so you obviously missed that season, and I'm sure a chunk of the next one. Like, I think it certainly sucks in the short term when a guy goes through that, but every time you talk to them, 2, 3, even 10 years later, they always look back on it as something that was like a blessing in disguise. Like, do you view it like that now? Like, did you learn a lot during that rehab timeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think I learned, that the preparation side. It made me really start to take that way more seriously than I had previously. I hadn't had injuries, and I just, thought I was invincible. young kid still, so
Mhm.
you go through something like that, and you realize that it could all be over tomorrow. You're one pitch away from never throwing a ball again. So it just kind of instilled in me that daily routine that I go through. Soft tissue or whatever it may be. Just in order to continue to be as good as I have been.
I'm curious as you kind of look back on the progression. You said you're drafting, I think, at 160, 165,
Hmm.
and now you're 200 to 205. When did that 40 pounds happen? Like, was it all early? Was it something that you did during that Tommy John rehab? What was the timeline?
Um, it was, I would say, the jump and like my weight and strength wise came after the 18 season.
Mhm,
I had just come back from TJ, and
mhm,
you know, I I was really struggling,
mhm.
and then so I went into that off season thinking that I was going to be a free agent after 2019. So I just needed to dedicate myself and do as much as I could, and you know uh, get in the weight room, and just get as strong as I could, and that was my mindset that off season. And then I came back in 19, and they moved me to the bullpen. Um, And I think those shorter outings allowed me to max out, instead of kind of conserving my energy. And that's where I took that big velo jump as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was like 3.5 ticks, both average and peak. Um, did you go through an adjustment period? Like, I think a lot of times guys see that big jump and, obviously it's unique to have that big of a jump, but guys have to understand how to use it. Like, you can really fall in love with always trying to throw hard and, you deal with some pronounced soreness just because it's like nobody pulls their hamstrings if they don't run fast, but you start throwing really
Yeah.
hard and the soreness can be really pronounced. Did you have like kind of an adjustment period where it was physically being able to manage it or, even more so like how you attack hitters with it?
Um, to be honest, and the way that I felt, I really didn't notice anything. I think I was just my body was in tune at that point, and just in peak performance. So I really didn't notice anything soreness wise. But I mean, yeah, at that point, it was. I just want to see if I can throw this by this guy.
Yeah.
You kind of fall in love with it, like you said,
Yeah.
which was, honestly what got me to the big leagues. And then trying to do that at the big league level didn't work out that well. I had like a 4 ERA in my first stint in 19. And then coming back in 20, it was almost the exact opposite, where they had me throwing my off speed all the time and surprising guys with fastballs.
We joke, and I probably said this 50 times over the course of this podcast. It's easier to make a fast guy strong than it is to make a strong guy fast. We do, kind of Proteus tests with like force profiling with guys, and obviously force plates are big in the game as well. Like, do you feel like you were always that springy guy, like very, very reactive at like a young age, and really was almost just like a matter of time until you put the right strength in the right places, and it just allowed you to leverage a lot of that elasticity just a little bit better?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, we did the testing earlier this year, and like,
Yeah.
I mean, you confirmed it for me, but I always felt like I was, more of just like a fast twitch athlete, not necessarily the strongest guy, but extremely fast twitch, and I think that played a big role.
Absolutely. So, do you think there are other factors? Like, did the velocity jump not just because of the pen and working out? Like, did it actually fundamentally change your delivery? Because we hear about some guys that they get stronger, they get more athletic in various ways, they create better, I guess, stability in certain positions. Did it feel like you were able to do things differently in your delivery, or was it just putting like the raw materials in place for a delivery that was kind of ready made already?
Yeah, I mean, before that, I hadn't made any changes.
Mhm,
If anything, maybe I added some more long toss,
mhm.
going into that year, like in preparation, but overall, I think my delivery stayed pretty much the same.
That's awesome. All right, so it would not be a Devin Williams podcast without talking about changeups. You probably get sick of talking about them, right? Um,
No, I mean, I already know that's what everyone wants to talk about, so I
I
don't
feel
I don't
like
really blame you.
if my changeup was that good, I'd want to talk about it all the time. But I think as a probably a more interesting discussion is you always had one, but it went from kind of an average changeup, early in your minor league career to, arguably like the best in the game over a matter of a couple of years. Do you think a huge part of it was just that it became more separated when the velo jumped? Or, I mean, obviously it's unique in a lot of different ways. What was it that took your change up from what it was when you were drafted to what it is now?
I mean, personally, I always thought that it was really good. And
Mhm.
then, um, it's kind of, you have to use it differently as a starter than I use it now.
Yeah.
But I think it was more, just finding the right time to use it, especially out of the pen. If I get to two strikes on a guy and he hasn't seen it, I mean, I'll take those odds every time.
Mhm.
But I'm blanking.
No, it's all right. What are the things that go through your mind? Like, are there certain cues? Like, I've heard, Max Scherzer talk about like putting the handcuffs on somebody, like driving really, really aggressive pronation with his. Like, are there certain like cues that you use, whether it's analogies or like an external focus that you use when you throw the changeup, that differentiates it from the rest of your arsenal?
I mean, at this point, it's just kind of second nature to me.
Yeah.
But we all go through, little instances where you kind of lose it, and the way that I
Mhm.
get myself back on track is just I hold a circle change. So just over here like this, I just focus on throwing the circle like at the ground,
Mhm.
getting out in front of it. That way, I'm not falling off and letting it fly out, um,
Mhm.
and keeping that on the plate instead of a competitive pitch that ends up in the other
Mhm.
batter's box.
Do you play catch with it a ton? I'm always curious about guys with that, or is it something that you just bust out on the mound?
Yeah, I mean it's like a big field pitch for me, so I like
Yeah.
to throw it at 100 feet, 120 feet. I can just kind of flipping it, feeling it out, and then I'll kind of turn it more into the changeup that you see on the mound. Like the closer I
Mhm.
get to my partner,
Mhm.
kind of pulling down like you do with the fastball.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's a big thing for me. I do that daily.
Do you find that there are guys that try to emulate it and don't have a prayer of doing so? I feel like it's unique in the sense that it's a high spin changeup. Like how many guys have actually tried to learn it? Has anybody ever come close?
Um, I mean, Suter tried
Mhm.
to learn a few years ago it was the 2020 season, but
Mhm.
it didn't work out for him because he naturally cuts everything, so he's
Mhm.
just not a pronator. Um, but I can't really think of anyone other than that.
Yeah, I mean it's just fascinating because it's probably the only changeup in baseball history that spins at a higher rate than the fastball you throw. It really is like a left-handed slider, right?
Yeah.
Um, so like when there are times that you lose it, what's the play to get it back? Because we had Jake Fishman actually who developed like a new slider, and he was on 4 or 5 episodes ago, and I thought one of the things that was fascinating. He's like, everyone wants to develop a new pitch, and that's all well and good. It's really easy when it's in a controlled environment in the off season. It's totally different altogether when you're like pitching in a big league bullpen and maybe you're not as regular as you would. You're saving your bullets for when it matters. And all of a sudden you realize you haven't thrown it off a mound for 3 or 4 days and you start to lose it. So how to maintain a pitch is important. Is there like a go-to when you actually, in your pregame throwing, in your mound work before you actually enter a game where you have to have a certain amount of feel for it?
Yeah, um, I mean, when you lose it, like I said, I just have to remind myself that I need to get to the front of the baseball because
Mhm.
when I lose it, I start to get inside of it, and then it's
Mhm.
it's running away, and it's just not even competitive from the time it leaves my hand. So
Mhm.
that's really my focus.
Mhm.
And in terms of staying ready, like you haven't been on the mound in 3 or 4 days, I throw flat grounds pretty much every day. So
Really?
I just like to feel out my pitches, like maybe two fastballs, two changeups, and two
Mhm.
cutters. Like if you need to keep it really light, but I like to do that every day.
That's awesome. You talked about 2019 kind of being a little bit of a struggle for you when you first went up and learning the lessons. And 2020 was, your breakout year. I think you gave up like one earned run all year in a shortened season. To some degree, was it a blessing in disguise that you had that higher workload and success in a shortened season where it gave you kind of a chance to learn what it took to pitch out of a big league bullpen without absolutely being destroyed after 162.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a um, good first experience. Making the team out of summer camp or whatever it was, but just kind of getting my feet wet, and then it turned into, I had a pretty big role on the team. So that was a good experience, learning from Hayter and Phelps that we had there at that time. But like just learning from those guys how to manage your daily throwing, because um, in the minor leagues I would throw 2 innings. They still had me stretched out a little bit longer.
Mhm.
I'd throw 2, maybe 3 innings sometimes, and have 3 or 4 days off before I pitched again. So that was, kind of foreign to me. And I mean, I had really only been in the bullpen for a year at that point. So I was still just, soaking everything up and taking in as much information as I could.
Learn how to go back to back. Was that a challenge for you? Because I feel like that's the thing when I see guys switch from starting to relieving that they always seem to struggle with the most.
Yeah. I mean, that I had only done that one time in the minor leagues before I got called up. So going to like, I didn't do it in 19, but then in 20, they kind of expected that out of me. And it was, something that I wanted to be able to do. So, just kind of figuring out the daily, routine post game, like the type of things I need to do in order to pitch again the next day. Just
Mhm.
figuring those things out.
That was actually my next question. Like, what lessons have you learned, regarding like taking care of your body, in not just like a high workload scenario, but also, like these are high leverage innings, right? You're throwing, previously the eighth and really now the ninth in Milwaukee. What were the lessons that those guys imparted to you, and then what are the ones that you've learned on your own?
Really, I think it's just to trust my stuff. I think
Mhm.
that's, one of the biggest lessons anyone can learn as a
Mhm.
pitcher is just to trust what you do, regardless of who's in the box or, if you're in AAA or the big leagues, like you do what you're good at. You
Yeah.
can't just um, start throwing a Corbin Burns cutter because that's what works. We don't all have that. So I think that was the biggest thing for me to just continue to trust in myself and what I bring to the table.
Mhm. What are your go-tos post game? Say you throw on a Thursday night, you're probably going to have to throw, Friday as well. Like post game, what are the key entities? Obviously, there's nutrition, there's hydration, but do you have particular like recovery approaches that you really like to use?
Sometimes I'll BFR or Mark Pro. I'm definitely doing one or the other.
Mhm.
You don't need to do both, but I'll definitely do one of them.
Mhm.
Depending, like if I have this is the second time this week that I might have to go back to back, then I'll BFR
Mhm.
to just try and get a little bit more recovery. But
Yeah.
typically, if it's just one or the first time I had thrown that week, I would just Mark Pro,
Yeah.
leave
So,
that on for like 2 hours.
yeah, but all active. I mean, that's the name of the game. It's not just like a bunch of, throwing an ice pack and being passive. You're trying to actually move.
Yeah, yeah.
I
We
like that.
mix in a pool workout or something maybe the next day to get your body kind of kick started again, ready to go that night.
One other one that I was like particularly curious about is, you're a guy that throws with a ton of extension. We even had some interesting conversations about how like you've played around with your delivery with like different out amounts of extension. Um, was this something that you ever actively like tried to create? Was it something that maybe just happened secondarily to being really athletic in your delivery, or was it did you grasp at a young age that basically being on top of hitters quickly could sometimes create a really good competitive advantage for you?
Yeah, I didn't lean into it until this past season.
Yeah.
I kind of noticed in 21 that I was starting to get further and further out, like 7-1, 7-2. And then this year it was it just kind of happened that I was, getting out to 7-5, 7-6, things like that. And it just kind of fixed my direction towards the plate and made my command better. So then I just, kind of ran with it. And then after that, I started getting even more extension, which, I mean, I'm sure at some point it's not necessarily a good thing, but kind of finding that sweet spot in there. But yeah, just kind of leaned into that this year. I figured that well, the results are saying that the more extension that I get, the more ride my fastball gets, and the more swing and miss it is, regardless of whatever velo it is. I
Mhm.
kind of had a velocity dip with it, but it was playing better than it ever had in the past.
I think that's an interesting one. So often we get freaked out by, what some kind of like a just I guess a descriptive measure, something like extension really tells us, or even velocity to some degree, and we don't take a step back and see how it can actually like truly impact outcomes. We see that a lot with guys who maybe are really closed off in the direction, but they're it saps their velo, but their deception is higher, and they get more guys out. So sometimes you got to kind of embrace the weird, even if it's something I guess you found by accident in this case.
Yeah. I mean, that's I've preached that for a long time, to be unique. I've
Mhm.
never understood why we tell kids to, have this cookie cutter delivery when you turn on the TV and watch a big league game, there's really no one that looks exactly the same. If someone had changed Josh Hader's delivery when he was a kid, then we'd be missing out on one of the best pitchers of our generation.
I love that. Are there guys, in that vein that you watch? Like, do you pay attention? I mean, like Logan Gilbert, right, is a guy that gets way down the mound. There are a few guys out there that really create that kind of extension. Is it something you actually try to create, or try to actually emulate in any way, or in the way that they
Um,
pitch or the way they attack it?
yeah, I would say at this point, like it's something that I focus on. I
Mhm,
look at it in between games and what was my fastball or my extension
mhm,
on this fastball, and same with the changeup. Um, in terms of watching people, it's kind of I've learned to, you know, I've picked little things up from Freddie Peralta, who's
mhm,
on our team. He's on the Brewers, and he's a big extension guy as well. I mean, I'm a little bit longer than him, but if you watch him, he'll throw a fastball at 90 miles an hour, and the next one's 96. Like it doesn't really make sense, but the thing that stays the same is his extension. He's at about 7 feet, I think, on all of his pitches, and you can just see how it plays with the fastball.
I think that's a really interesting. Maybe we actually kind of, I guess, transition to like a bigger picture question. Like I actually asked Pete Strzelecki this a couple weeks ago. And I'm really curious to see your take on it because you have a few more years. Is what do you think the casual fan doesn't really appreciate about like Major League Baseball bullpen pitchers? Like, do you think they have any appreciation for just the crazy amount of workload that it takes and all that, or what would you say is something that folks don't necessarily appreciate about how hard that role is?
Um, that they don't appreciate.
Yeah.
I would say, the amount of times a year a guy is asked to throw, or he might not necessarily get in the game, or but he's warming up, so he's
Mhm.
he's throwing with high intent, getting ready to come in, but it just didn't happen that day. So at the end of the year, you might have, I don't know, 90 times where you warmed up, but you actually only pitched 70 times, and I think people probably don't pay attention to that. Um, you know the difficulty it takes to be locked in from the
Mhm.
second you come into a game. You can't really work into it the way that a starter gets to.
Mhm.
They might have a rough first inning, give up 2 or 3 runs, but then you can kind of bounce back and go 6, 7 innings and keep your team in the
Mhm.
ball game, and you did your job that day.
Mhm.
Um, I come in the ninth inning and I don't have it that day. I give up 2 runs and the game's over. You know,
Yeah.
um, it's that aspect I think is like the biggest difference to me between starting and relieving is
Mhm.
the small window that you have to figure it out that day.
I was actually curious how was like eighth versus ninth inning? Because obviously, like it wasn't always eighth, right? Like sometimes you'd come out and you'd face a guy where you matched up well with them, and a lot of times managers set you up for success with like knowing the run of guys that you're going to face when you're to some degree in that setup role. When you're closing, like you get everybody no matter what. Is it a different preparation process where you're looking at actually all nine hitters a lot closer versus just like the 3 to 5 that you think you might actually face?
Um, I mean, I don't really see a difference between the two, to be
Mhm.
honest. And I mean, the way that Council managed me and Hader when he was there kind of got me ready for this ninth inning role.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we didn't do matchups.
Yeah.
It was I had the eighth inning. It didn't matter who was coming up, and then
Mhm.
vice versa. He had the ninth inning. It didn't matter who was coming up. And that's what
Mhm.
we were rolling with. So I mean, kind of challenged us in a way,
Mhm.
but I think it also just made me better.
That's good stuff. All right, so we always do a lightning round on the tail end of every podcast. You can go as in depth as you want. We kind of hinted at this, but what pitchers do you like to watch in today's game? They don't have to be like you or anything like that. Is there anybody that you admire?
In today's game, um, I really like Cease from the White Sox,
Yeah.
Alcantara, obviously, and Corbin. Corbin Burns is. I don't even understand how he makes the baseball do the things he does, but it's a treat to watch that guy every 5 days
That's awesome. Favorite teammate of all time? You can name a couple if you want to, and then why.
of all time. Man, that's a tough one. You're gonna get some people upset. um, I got to go with Nate Greep. He was a minor league teammate of mine, um, but he's just a great guy. That was my throwing partner in Biloxi when I started to figure everything out, and
Right on.
you know, we were in it together.
His shins paid the price for you.
Yeah, he actually has a really good changeup himself, so we were just kind of throwing balls off each other's shins every day.
Right on. Give teenage Devin Williams some advice. If you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself at age 16?
Um, don't take anything for granted. I think if I had that mindset earlier, I might have reached the big leagues earlier.
That's good feedback. What about you as as like an early draft pick, 19, 20-year-old Devin? Would it be the same advice?
Yeah, the same advice. I think early on, I can honestly say this now that I didn't do everything I needed to do. But then life led me to learn those lessons the hard way. And now I'm more experienced for it.
That's great feedback, man. You got some good Instagram stuff. You're underscore DVN23. Pretty active there. So folks can check you out there as well. Appreciate you taking the time, man. This is good. I picked up some good stuff that I didn't quite know about either. And hopefully it helps us get you on a good path, although you're on a great path already. So thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.